Congratulations to the winners of Hildean's 2020 8th grade Lincoln Essay Competition. We received 167 applications from all over Vermont. A first, second, and third place winner was chosen from each of 4 regions, as well as 4 honorable mentions. Please enjoy the following videos of each of this year's honorees reading their essays, which were in response to the following prompt. Identify one issue facing Vermont that you think your state government, the Scott administration, and/or the legislature should address. Describe the challenge and its negative impacts, then explain why governmental action is appropriate, suggest one or more actions that state government should take, and explain why you think such action would improve the situation. Now, the prompt was inspired by the following quote from Abraham Lincoln. The legitimate object of government is to do for the people what needs to be done, but which they cannot, by individual effort, do at all, or do so well for themselves.
Substandard housing in Vermont, the price renters pay. Many Vermonters living in substandard housing are faced with unsafe living conditions, which lead to extreme stress and numerous health issues. The state government should address the health and safety of rental properties in Vermont by creating a statewide system where renters have recourse through professional and support and impartial inspectors. The longer we wait to fix the problem, the larger the problem will become. There are many different elements in a home that can be unsafe for renters, such as rodent infestations and mold, as well as the structural integrity of the property. The Rental Housing Health Code, which defines the minimum health standards for rental properties in Vermont, establishes clear responsibility for landlords to control pests and maintain the structural elements of the property. Neglecting to maintain the property exposes tenants to various health risks. According to Renters at Risk report by Tessa Horan, having excessive moisture or poor ventilation in a home can harm mental and physical health. Feeling unsafe creates extreme stress. Stress can affect a child's ability to attend and pay attention in school, and an adult's ability to be successful at work or maintain a job. The state of Vermont has a code that clearly dictates rules for landlords and tenants to follow regarding health and safety issues. It is clear, however, that these codes are not enforced. I propose there be a clear system for evaluation and accountability. A way for the Vermont state government to address these problems is to create a system with a single goal: to help renters and landlords deal with safety and issues in a healthy and respectful way. The state system would arrange for impartial and unbiased inspectors to visit rental properties every year on a mandatory basis. This system would be successful in sending professionals to rental properties to determine problems and help renters and landlords find a way to remedy them. Marilyn Griffin, Vermont Legal Aid VLA attorney, stated that while the VLA can address any immediate problems, the state cannot address every problem that comes their way. Many renters living in substandard housing struggle to maintain their housing issues due to lack of money or knowledge. It is imperative that a system be put in place that protects tenants and landlords. The problems related to substandard housing affect too many Vermonters for this current insufficient system to continue. A system like I have proposed would mean general well-being and a sense that the government cares about all of its citizens. A structured system of protection and accountability would lead to fewer missed school and work days, which would save the government a substantial amount of money. Safe, affordable housing would mean less homelessness and a healthier population in our state. Many low-income Vermonters already feel as though the government does not care for them. We cannot afford for our citizens to feel this way any longer.
Conserving Vermont's future. Nearly every day this winter after school, I and the rest of my cross-country ski team lace up our boots and run across the parking lot to the soccer field, where we strap on our skis and glide into the woods. The trails are full of wildlife, and little tracks of small creatures are sprinkled across the snow. It is a privilege to be able to be in the wilderness in a matter of minutes. Our community is nestled in a beautiful place. Our businesses thrive on people coming to ski or see the natural beauty of Vermont. If we continue to develop the habitat of Vermont, not only will it hurt our economy, but the animals will be affected. The development of natural areas and animal habitat is a big problem in Vermont. Every year, 1,500 acres of important animal habitat is turned into houses and businesses at the expense of the animals living there. Development not only ruins animals' homes, but it can also spread invasive species, which can harm native species. When you are developing natural area, you probably never think about what the land is currently. For all you know, this could be the home of hundreds of organisms. Additionally, the Green Mountains would not be the same without the green. I know that in our small town and community, a lot of small businesses thrive on tourists coming to see the sights. Without our beautiful landscape, there would be less tourists to fuel the economy. Government action is important because proper regulation is needed so we can preserve our beautiful environment. We need some guidelines so people do not stamp out all other living things in the state. I know that I don't want Vermont to lose all its wild areas because that is one of the things that makes Vermont special. Reducing the impact of development would make nearly all people happy. The 2008 Vermonter poll states that preserving Vermont is something that 97% of Vermonters want. There are several beneficial actions the government can take. One is supporting conservation businesses. This will bring attention to these businesses that are doing a lot to keep Vermont beautiful. Second, weakening Act 250 is a big mistake because this act is designed to protect wildlife and requires people to think before developing land. Third, conserving large chunks of land is better than small chunks here and there. This would also eliminate human-animal contact. Lastly, doing research and conserving places that have thriving animal populations would help Vermont's animal population. Vermont should be a place where businesses, people, and wildlife can thrive simultaneously. Doing these few things can make a big difference to help us preserve Vermont bit by bit.
Hello, my name is Una Colby, and I will be reading The Opioid Crisis, Not Alone. The sirens blare as red and blue lights illuminate the unknown faces of strangers. It feels as though every shout is being muffled under the dense expanse of darkness. Your brother cries next to you as Dad is rushed away into the cold light from inside the ambulance. Just before the door closes, you see one last glimpse of the hollowed face that seems so unfamiliar now. Just a little more and the pain will go away, he had said. 110. That's how many people died in Vermont in 2018 due to opioid-related reasons. How many more have to endure loss before we find a better way to help? Drugs prescribed to us are just as dangerous as the drugs that are manufactured and distributed illegally when used irresponsibly. Prescription opioids that are used to manage pain are very helpful in some situations, but you cannot always rely on people to use them responsibly. The whole concept of the opioid crisis is that people are misusing drugs and becoming addicted. When someone is going through addiction, it affects everyone who knows them. Imagine being a kid and your parents are addicted to opioids. You don't know where your next meal will come from because your parents are spending all the money on their next fix. You won't invite anyone over to your house because your home isn't a safe place to be. You can't learn anything because you're worried all the time. Imagine being the parent and all the guilt and shame that you feel. You refuse to ask for help because you're embarrassed of the hole you've dug yourself into and are now dragging everyone you know and love into as well. All of your relationships have been significantly damaged, and your kids don't want you to come to school because they can't rely on you to act emotionally stable because of your addiction. Vermont's use of Suboxone, methadone, and buprenorphine as long-term solutions is only going to get people addicted to those drugs. Vermont needs to offer more places and beds for people wishing for help and to escape their situation. If we don't have enough resources available, we can't expect people to get better. People won't quit if they don't want to, but we have to be there to offer them help as soon as they are. Turning someone away for just a few days is more days without help. putting their lives in danger of overdose. Why do people take drugs? Because they're unhappy. Why do people get addicted to drugs? Because the drugs make them happy. Why do people stay addicted to drugs? Because it's easier than having to endure the pain of withdrawal. Then, I guess, our most important question is, why are we in such a place of unhappiness that we look to drugs as our only hope of ever feeling that again? We need you, as our government, to help us find out what that is.
Epidemic. Noun. A widespread occurrence of a disease in a community at a particular time. Vermont is currently in the midst of possibly the greatest epidemic it has ever known, and few people even acknowledge that it fits the above definition. The beast known as opioid use disorder, hereafter referred to as OUD, has its claws in around 15,000 to 20,000 people in our state. This life-ruining affliction claims around 110 lives a year in our state, making death by OUD more common than death by car crash. Most Vermont systems that try to treat OUD are based on the concept of abstinence. Abstinence is simply not an effective or realistic way of treating this disease, as it takes the average person 8 years and 4 to 5 attempts at getting clean to achieve just 1 year of remission from OUD. So what is an effective way to treat OUD? How can our state effectively try and stop this disease? The answer is simply to treat it like the epidemic that it is. The first step in treating OUD as a disease is to use a method commonly used to treat diseases, prescribing medication to fight it. An effective drug used against opioids is buprenorphine. Buprenorphine is used to treat dependence and addiction to opioids. Research shows that when people use this drug, they are 50% less likely to die of OUD. In Burlington, there is a program called Safe Recovery, which, among other things, provides access to buprenorphine. People who visit Safe Recovery and programs like it are 5 times more likely to enter treatment and 3 times more likely to stop using drugs altogether than people who don't. However, in our state, doctors need to complete a 10-hour training course to prescribe buprenorphine. Ironically, it takes no additional training to prescribe the opioids blamed for creating this epidemic. A 2016 study said that an overwhelming majority of doctors believe that people with OUD are more dangerous than the general public, and that employers should be allowed to deny them work because of their addiction. This prejudice affects their ability to treat their patients effectively, as only a small percentage of Vermont doctors complete the 10-hour training course required to prescribe buprenorphine. Our state government needs to do something to treat OUD, and I believe the state needs to require every doctor to complete the buprenorphine training course in order to get their Vermont medical license. Doing this would let all doctors prescribe their patients with OUD buprenorphine. And in addition to enabling all doctors to prescribe buprenorphine, it would also help our doctors overcome their prejudice and understand the rigors of addiction, and how hard it truly is to escape the beast that is OUD. Great epidemics should have long ago become a thing of the past. Humans are smarter than diseases. We have found cures and medications for most all of the great diseases of our time. So why not OUD?
I'm Eleuthera Barbrandt, and I'll be reading my Hildene Lincoln essay, Menstrual Supplies Must Be Tax Exempt. Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. This quote by Hillary Clinton upholds the simple statement that women's rights are the fundamental human rights, which include the right to live free from discrimination. 31 states in the United States, including Vermont, are discriminating against women by taxing menstrual supplies for profit. Menstrual supplies are fundamental necessities for women who menstruate, and this needs to change. Vermont currently imposes a 6% sales tax on all menstrual supplies, with the option of an additional 1% at the local level. The average Vermont woman will pay about $1,773.33 on tampons in her lifetime. The sales and tax amount up to $124.13 on tampons, and another $31.03 in tax on panty liners per lifetime. Women in Vermont pay $7,646,210 on menstrual supplies annually and pay $458,773 in-state sales tax. This means for women in Vermont lose a combined total of approximately $25 million in their lifetimes due to the taxation alone. Women who have longer or heavier periods will pay substantially more. This tax on menstrual supplies violates the Public Accommodations Act, which prohibits a place of public accommodation from discriminating against or treating people unequally based on, among other things, sex or gender. It also transgresses the Consumer Protection Act, which bans unfair or deceptive acts and/or practices in commerce. In 2019, the House Bill H-29 was introduced to add menstrual supplies to a list of items eliminated from sales tax in Vermont. It would prevent taxation on all sanitary napkins, tampons, and other menstruation-related supplies purchased in Vermont. The tax department responded by recommending legislative action as the easiest solution, but this could take an excessive amount of time. Action needs to be immediate. The Vermont state government must exempt all menstrual supplies from being taxed in 2020. Menstrual supplies are listed as feminine hygiene products and are sorted into the taxable grooming and hygiene product category. Items in this category are taxable because they are not deemed necessities. A more suitable place for menstrual supplies in the tax code would be the medical equipment and supplies category. Menstrual supplies are absolute necessities for the health and well-being of women, and this category is tax exempt. Vermont state tax code is flawed. By continuing to tax menstrual supplies, our Vermont state government is displaying a form of discrimination against Vermont women. Eliminating this tax would affect our budget, but exploiting women because of their bodily functions is inequitable and unconstitutional. Other states have fixed this problem, and now it's time for our Vermont state legislature to do the same.
Safe Injection Facilities as a Solution to Vermont's Opioid Crisis by Vivian Halliday. Addiction is a disease. It has nothing to do with failure, with sin, with weakness, or with being less than a whole person. Dawn Tatro, mother of Jenna Ray Tatro, 1992 to 2019. Opioid addiction is a serious problem in Vermont. In 2010, 37 Vermonters suffered opioid-related deaths. By 2018, that number had increased dramatically, rising to 110. Nationally, more than 100 Americans die every day from an accidental opioid overdose. In 2018, for the first time in history, the likelihood of dying from an opioid overdose was higher than in a car crash. There have been many attempted solutions to Vermont's opioid crisis, such as limiting the number of opioids prescribed by doctors and declaring this crisis an emergency, as then-Governor Shumlin did in 2014. However, these initiatives fail to address the long-term recovery from opioid addiction. According to research, it takes the typical opioid-addicted user 8 years and 4 to 5 attempts to achieve remission for a single year. To effectively combat the disease of opioid addiction, the government of Vermont should provide residents with long-term recovery opportunities by establishing safe injection sites. While Vermont offers multiple treatment options for addiction, most facilities require patrons to stop using illegal opioids immediately upon entry. However, the brain of an addict becomes dependent on an outside substance and cannot function without it. Abrupt changes from all to nothing usually result in relapses. Government intervention by establishing safe injection sites will provide effective treatment. These sites provide supervision as addicts consume opioids using progressively smaller doses over time as they work toward sobriety. If users overdose, staff are present to immediately administer the overdose-reversing drug naloxone. They also provide supplementary services like free drug tests and counseling. Compared to traditional treatment methods, injection sites have been proven safe and effective. For example, a site in Vancouver, British Columbia showed a 35% reduction in deaths related to overdose and a 30% increase in users entering treatment. In the approximately 120 safe injection sites around the world, there have been no fatal overdoses.
However, federal law prohibits safe injection sites in the United States. According to the Controlled Substances Act, it is illegal to own a property where illegal drugs are being used. Advocates of safe injection have argued that the intent of the law was to criminalize drug houses that facilitate drug use, not medical facilities that treat it. Several American cities are engaged in court cases to establish legal injection sites. Vermont could set an example for the nation by pushing back on this law, making it easier for Vermonters and Americans alike to get treatment and support needed. Safe injection sites are safe, effective places that Vermont needs to combat the opioid addiction epidemic. In the case of cigarettes, smokers routinely use patches and gum to gradually wean themselves from their addiction to nicotine. If this practice is so widely accepted, why can't people accept safe injection sites that are trying to achieve the same goal?
A small state, a shrinking population. Buried in the northeast corner of the vast American landscape, Vermont possesses some of the premier geographical features and natural beauty in our nation. These factors make Vermont an appealing destination for tourists and young people looking to start families. Yet, hidden from the superficial glance are debilitating taxes and legislative restrictions, making Vermont a difficult place to live and do business in. Ultimately, these inconveniences have overshadowed the incentives to move to our state, resulting in a gradual population decline and a limited workforce. Hence, to resolve Vermont's chronic population decline and incentivize young people to move to our state, the administration of Governor Phil Scott and the Vermont State Legislature must take drastic measures. According to the most recent decennial census, Vermont's population sits just below 624,000. Furthermore, the U.S. Census Bureau indicates that there have been more deaths than births in our state since 2016. The census also confirms that more people left Vermont than moved to it in the past decade. The result of Vermont's population decline is evident within the underwhelming magnitude of our state's workforce. To the frustration of many businesses, such as the iconic Vermont Country Store, Vermont's labor shortage has obstructed their hopes of expansion. Cabot Orton, the owner of the business, expressed his feelings to VPR when he stated, "We can't grow as much as we'd like to because we can't find any more labor." Furthermore, the labor force Vermont does possess is one of the oldest in the nation, a statistic that coincides with the fact that Vermont's population is the third oldest in the country. To resolve Vermont's population decline and aging workforce, the state legislature must lower property and income taxes. Especially considering that many Americans are in a financial predicament due to student loans, Vermont's high taxes repel young families. In fact, CBS News reports that Vermont has the 7th highest tax burden in the country. Lowering these taxes would make Vermont a more likely destination for young people. Additionally, the Scott administration and state legislature can attract young entrepreneurs by revising Act 250. Enforced in 1970, the act aims to maintain Vermont's rural and environmental charm. Nonetheless, it requires business owners to endure a multi-year task of applying for and obtaining land use permits if they wish to make developments. Opposed to other states with more streamlined processes, Act 250 deters young entrepreneurs from Vermont. The revision of the act would incentivize American citizens to move to Vermont, knowing that both lower taxes and the ease of expansion ensure that their newly founded company can succeed. For many Vermonters, it is difficult to grasp the fact that our state's population crisis must be resolved. Nonetheless, it is important to recognize that young men and women moving to our state will fill job openings and allow cherished Vermont businesses to thrive. In order to transition Vermont into an era of cultural and economic prosperity, it is crucial that the state legislature rectifies our dwindling population.
The importance of paid parental leave in creating a stress-free, productive state. Vermont currently has no paid parental leave laws. Should we? These laws have benefits, but also issues we must overcome. Parental leave is an important right protected by our state. But how beneficial is it if parents have to deal with financial stress, often leading them to return to work early and struggle to find childcare? One Vermont parent voiced her stress. Working is hard to do when you're sleep deprived and have more responsibility than you've ever had in your life. I believe that legislative action is appropriate whenever we, as a state, face a problem that we can fix. Because parental leave is something that falls under state jurisdiction, we have an obligation to respond when an issue arises. Low-income families tend to face the most challenges when dealing with new children and work. In fact, 50% of low-income parents, those with incomes lower than twice the federal poverty line, will let go from or quit their jobs during pregnancy or immediately following childbirth, as compared to 11% of higher income parents. Providing paid parental leave would create a fair playing field, allowing all families to thrive. I suggest two simple legislative changes. First, passing a bill that would guarantee parents 12 weeks of paid leave immediately following in addition to their family, whether this be through both adoption or foster care. Second, we should guarantee leave without restrictions on who can take it. Currently, parental leave is guaranteed only to Vermonters who have been employed under the same employer working 30 hours a week for 12 months, if the employer employs 10 or more people. In short, not everyone is guaranteed paid parental leave. Eliminating restrictions on eligibility would allow all Vermonters to experience parenthood in a positive light. It seems obvious that paid parental leave should be provided. However, in order to do so, we must overcome a hurdle. How can we afford it? When employees aren't working, others may need to cover for them, meaning the workplace must pay for 2 people for 1 job. Some worry that this will increase sexist tendencies around hiring women of childbearing age. California has discovered a solution. Their state disability insurance program funds paid leave using employee contributions. Basically, California has a tax. It is automatically withheld from one's paycheck, and it puts towards legal benefits. This means less money in each paycheck, but more when you consider the legal assistance. This could work in Vermont equally well. Using small taxes added to each paycheck, we can create a paid parental leave program. In closing, I want to reiterate the importance of stress-free parental leave in a memorable period following the arrival of a new family member. Paid parental leave is a staple in creating a happy, productive state.
Let's keep Vermont green. When Nathaniel Wyeth patented the plastic soda bottle in 1973, he probably had no idea what he was getting the world into. Now plastic bottles have become the poster child for pollution, even though they are a common household item. More than 1 million are sold every minute, but only 30% of the bottles consumed in the United States get recycled. Plastic bags are just as bad. They take more than 1,000 years to decompose and kill hundreds of animals. Vermont is taking steps to fix these problems, continuing our history of striving for equality and conservation. From an early ban on slavery to legalizing same-sex marriage, and now the fight to save our planet, let's continue to be the state that makes the hard but right decisions. The U.S. only recycling about 1/3 of its plastic bottles is a big problem, but there are other issues surrounding these plastic containers besides their pollution. Researchers have found that storing plastic bottles filled with water at high temperatures could leach chemicals into the liquid. A study conducted by the State University of New York also suggests that microplastics can be found in 93% of bottled water. These plastics can continue to pollute the soil after bottles have decomposed and flow into waterways, which could affect both tap and bottled water. How long will this cycle continue before we do something to stop it? In 2011, Milo Kress, a young Vermonter, started the Be Straw Free project, an effort to convince restaurants to stop wasting plastic straws. Milo is just one example of the many efforts Vermont and its citizens have taken to become more ecologically responsible. After many Vermont towns, including Manchester and Burlington, decided to ban plastic bags, Vermont's legislature took up the issue in a new bill, covering many single-use plastics, including plastic bags, straws, foam packaging, and beverage straws. This law will go into effect in July, which will lessen Vermont's general plastic output. Now, I would urge the government to take this bill one step further. Plastic bottles are such a commonplace item in everyday life, it will take more than a few people to correct this problem. Despite the fact that people often ignore this alternative, reusable water bottles are easy to obtain and much better for the environment than their plastic counterpart. They can usually be found in grocery stores, often the same ones where you buy plastic water bottles. I suggest that the Vermont legislature draft a bill, similar to S-113 Act 69, centering around restricting and or banning plastic bottles, with exceptions where necessary. For example, natural disaster emergency supplies. If Vermont wants to continue to be a leading state for ecological citizenship, this seems like the next logical step to me. The citizens and the government should work together to make our state a better, greener place.
Hi, my name is Delia Morgan, and I'm an 8th grader at the Upper Valley Waldorf School, and my essay is called Farming Feeds the Future. When you think of Vermont, what do you think of? Vivid green mountains, enchanting fall colors, fields with sweet-smelling roundbales, and red barns next to rolling pastures with grazing cows. Can you imagine a Vermont without those things? Would Vermont even be Vermont? This idea might be reality if not for dairy farmers. Much of the landscape you drive by is there because a farmer maintains it. 15% of the state is covered by dairy farms in the fields that provide their feed. That's 90,000 acres. The economy in Vermont relies on dairy. Vermont's economy is small, just 0.2% of the U.S. economy, yet we produce more than 1% of the nation's dairy products. That's 5 times our economic share. Our state also produces 63% of the milk produced in New England. Vermont depends on dairy to bring in 70% of the state's agricultural sales, not to mention the $360 million in wages dairy provides Vermonters with each year. Additionally, farming landscape shapes and drives tourism and recreational sports here by keeping land open and free of development. However, the dairy industry is plagued by numerous challenges, primarily volatile milk prices, climate change, and generational change. Due to these factors, last year there were 675 dairy farms in Vermont, compared to 1,015 a decade ago. This downward trend will in turn affect our economy via tourism, agricultural sales, jobs, and more. We cannot afford to ignore this problem. The state can help most in the area of generational change. Most Vermont dairy farmers are past middle age, and there are not enough young farmers to replace them as they retire. The dairy industry tries its best to get youth involved, with programs like 4-H and judging teams, but it's not enough. If we want to have dairy farms around in the future, Vermont needs to raise a new generation of farmers for itself. This is where Vermont's government comes in. The government should institute a mandatory program in schools where children get to visit a farm on a regular basis, weekly or monthly. Bringing school children to visit and help on farms is an excellent way to build a strong work ethic and respect for farmers, which increases public support and recognition of dairy farmers and all the work they do. I first learned about 4-H through visiting a local farm once a week with my 3rd grade class. I became an active 4-H member, and 5 years later, I am considering a career in agriculture. If all children have an opportunity like mine, more of them will join agricultural groups such as Future Farmers of America and 4-H, and become the farmers that help sustain the dairy industry, the economy, and Vermont for generations to come. The future belongs to the few of us still willing to get our hands dirty.
A Black student's take on the Vermont curriculum. The Vermont government should make their curriculum anti-racist. In Vermont schools, people of color face a lot of racism, such as microaggressions, bullying, white supremacy, and many other obstacles due to our race. On top of all that, we have to deal with racism in the curriculum. Currently, the curriculum only talks about slavery and how Africans got whipped and were forced to be slaves. That's it. From K through 8th, I have never learned anything about Harriet Tubman, Macy Jemison, Jane Bolin, or about any of the other people of color that did something other than getting beaten. There are so many incredibly accomplished African American people in science, art, math, history, and literature, but we never learn about them. Instead, we talk fascinatingly about all the amazing male white heroes who have served this country. This racist curriculum promotes white supremacy, which makes people of color feel lower status. All of our classes revolve around white people. Think about it. When a student of color sits in a Vermont classroom, most likely the majority of students and teachers are white. It's hard enough not seeing yourself in your community, but when you look around your school and you see white scholars, white words, white ideas, white history, white beliefs, white art, and white music, you start to feel less and less confident and incapable of achieving your dreams. Another result of whiteness in the curriculum is that white people see Black people as dangerous and not smart. This mindset creates a stereotype. Black people are seen as scary and unintelligent. Therefore, we get in trouble more and get targeted in schools and everywhere else. The percentage of students of color getting suspended is higher than white kids. If teachers keep teaching only white stories, the white kids will live that stereotype all of their lives. When I have experienced racial harassment, the administration asked me what I wanted to do about it. The government should make racism education a part of the certification process for teachers and staff. Then, when this happens, they don't have to ask a student what to do. The government should also mandate schools to hire more people of color. This way, white kids can get a broader understanding of how the world works from different perspectives. The government should provide conferences for teachers so that they can get a better understanding about race. This will help diversify their teaching. Teachers and staff have a lot to learn, and the government needs to help them, because kids of color have the same right to access education as white kids. Some of my teachers are starting to understand how the curriculum is affecting people of color, and they're really starting to incorporate that in class, which is very helpful. But we need to do more. If the government takes action, every student will get to learn about the wonderful, talented people of color in history and know that everyone is equally seen and represented. Thank you.
African American incarceration rates in Vermont. For a long time, Vermont has prided itself as being progressive and showing leadership on issues like slavery, racism, and gay rights. Despite our belief, though, in some areas, we're not living up to our image and are actually quite behind. Although Vermont has one of the lowest total incarceration rates of any state, it actually has one of the highest African American incarceration rates. This is unacceptable, racist, and needs to be changed. As of 2014, 1 in 14 African American men in Vermont were imprisoned. This was and still is damaging, as many families have become split apart. Black drivers are twice as likely to be arrested when pulled over as white ones. It is clear that Vermont's justice system is racist. This should not be the way that things are, and as it does not match our progressive values and morals. The Scott administration should fix this and make the justice system functional. Governmental action is appropriate because it is the law enforcement and judicial system that are at fault. These operate underneath the Vermont state government and the Scott administration, obviously, and are therefore subject to their jurisdiction. The Scott administration should do several things to improve the situation. First, stronger background checks should be established for both police and state judges. Second, there should be better unconscious bias training. programs. And finally, stronger evidence should be needed for sentencing for small, nonviolent crimes. Having better background checks would help lower the chance of someone with strong biases getting into the police or judicial department. Unconscious bias training would help eliminate existing bias in the system, and requiring more evidence before giving a sentencing for a small, nonviolent crime could make it harder for unconscious bias to come into play for the sentencing. This is because judges would have to rely on fact rather than instinct. Together, we should be able to reduce unjust arrests and bias sentencing. This would help fix the situation, reduce racism in Vermont, in the Vermont justice system. These problems should not be happening and need to end. It's the government's moral imperative to fix this situation and to continue on the path towards treating all people equally.
Vermont's job crisis, an opportunity for change. The state of Vermont is well known for our small towns and tightly knit communities, but our small state charm belies a troubling issue, a major lack of job opportunities for the citizens who call this place home. As we move forward into the 2020s, this threatens the sustainability of our proud state. According to an annual evaluation published by the American Legislative Exchange Council Center for Fiscal Reform, Vermont is ranked 49th out of 50 in terms of economic outlook. One of the reasons for this is our stagnant job growth. From 2017 to 2018, Vermont saw its job market expand by only 0.2%, while the national average was 1.254%. This means that Vermont's job growth is far behind its peers. This is a troubling trend that must be reversed. Government intervention is imperative. If this problem goes unchecked, many Vermonters will be forced to seek work elsewhere, putting our small communities at risk. In order to avoid this, the government needs to dedicate time and resources to creating more employment opportunities. A proven method to spur job growth would be cut taxes so that businesses that are already here can expand. Less taxation for citizens and businesses would mean more discretionary income that can be put to good use in our local economies. More thriving businesses will lead to more jobs for workers statewide. Currently, Vermont sits 1.1% below the national average in terms of job growth. Cutting taxes so that established and burgeoning businesses can thrive would help Vermont close the gap between itself and its fellow states. This type of government intervention is known as expansionary fiscal policy. This economic strategy decreases taxation while promoting government expenditures into the private sector, resulting in a boosted economy. We have seen the economic policy be successful domestically. It was utilized to help the U.S. climb out of the 2008 recession and seen overseas. In the early 2000s, Japan experienced a recession. As a solution, the Japanese government utilized expansionary fiscal policy. This sustained Japan through the recession and even helped the nation endure the economic fallout from the tsunami of 2011. When the Japanese government cut taxes and poured money into its business, they were able to create job opportunities for those who were unemployed. Due to the one-way government cuts, the policy may seem like it would fail to provide economic stimulus. In fact, when done correctly, consciously, this practice will create jobs through increased private spending. Though Japan is a world away, our economic situations are similar. The Vermont government can learn a lesson from the federal and Japanese governments in order to create more job opportunities for Vermonters. Vermont's economic forecast portends real trouble. As a small state, we cannot afford to lose more workers. Though job creation will not solve all of our problems, it is a step towards creating meaningful change. If we want to preserve our way of life, we must take action as soon as possible.
Vermont and gun control. Vermont has always been a pro-gun state. It's one of several states that allow constitutional carry, which doesn't require a permit to own or carry a handgun. Vermont is also the only state not to issue permits at all. After the Parkland incident in 2018, many states, including Vermont, strengthened their gun laws, but Vermont still has some gun laws that can be improved upon. Vermont has some of the least restrictive gun laws in the United States. Residents and non-residents don't need a gun permit to carry. Those 16 and older can own a handgun, and you can carry basically anywhere except school property, courthouses, or federal establishments. In 2018, Vermont improved its gun control laws by upping the legal age to buy a firearm to 21, limiting magazine capacity to 15 rounds for handguns and 10 rounds for long guns, and requiring background checks for all firearm sales. They also limited the transfer of firearms to only immediate family members and outlawed bump stocks. Even though Vermont has greatly enhanced its gun control laws, there is one problem that is yet to be discussed. One issue I believe the government should take care of is implementing a waiting period for purchasing guns. This issue has already been addressed by Governor Scott when he vetoed a bill for a 24-hour waiting period for handgun sales in June 2019. But some people in the Senate plan to propose a 48-hour waiting period in 2020. I believe that we should have at least a 24-hour waiting period for all firearm sales. There are only a few states that have waiting periods, but studies show waiting periods can reduce gun homicide and suicide rates. These studies show a decrease in gun homicides by 17% and a possible 7 to 11% decrease in gun suicides because of waiting periods. If Vermont were to implement a waiting period for gun purchases, it could help prevent several deaths in the state. According to Giffords Law Center, in Vermont, around 88% of gun-related deaths are suicides, and more than 54% of suicides in Vermont involve guns. Waiting periods can give time for those acting on an impulse to rethink what they're about to do, whether it's harming themselves or others. Implementing this law could be the next thing Vermont does to improve its gun laws like it did in 2018. Gun control might not be the biggest issue in Vermont, but it is something that should be improved upon across the United States. If Vermont, a state known for permissive gun laws, were to greatly strengthen them, other states might do the same. Abraham Lincoln said, "I like to see a man proud of the place in which he lives. I like to see a man live so that his place will be proud of him." I hope that one day the number of gun deaths in the United States will greatly decrease, and we can live in a country we're proud to be free in.
Unconscious bias. We all have bias. We are not born with bias, but we learn very fast. Even kindergartners can show signs of bias. As we grow, bias is programmed, which develops into unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is shown through acts that are discriminatory without knowing you are being discriminatory. For the purposes of this essay's argument, the term diverse or diversity includes race, gender, LGBTQ+, religion, ableism, classism, and ageism. It would benefit the citizens of Vermont to have mandatory age-appropriate education on unconscious bias in schools. The negative impacts of unconscious bias are that people of marginalized identities experience discrimination. Almost everyone has at least one marginalized identity because not many people fall into the categorically dominant male, white, Protestant, affluent, middle-aged, and college-educated grouping. In my research for this essay, I interviewed my friend Esther. Esther's marginalized identities include female, Asian, and English as a second language. When asked about experiences with bias discrimination, she responded, quote, "You will get more opportunity in life if you have more fair skin." End quote. She continued, quote, "People judge me by my skin and my looks because my features are not the same as them." End quote. Esther's story is just one of many, and this discrimination is targeted at minorities. School is the one place where everyone can learn. My proposal will work to prevent more experiences like Esther's from occurring. The current implementation of diversity education needs to include unconscious bias. There is a specific difference between what is actually happening and what needs to be done. Some teachers might choose to include an unconscious bias curriculum, but others might not. This is problematic for the fraction of students not getting this education. On page 30 of Bill H.3, the bill states that Vermont schools will, quote, "provide across its curriculum content and methods that enable students to explore safely questions of identity, race equality, and racism," end quote. I propose a new curriculum to teach students how to correct their biased behavior and empower them through knowledge. Everyone would have to take this class. It would not be just a unit. This is important because Vermont is becoming more increasingly diverse. The Vermont state government needs to create a mandatory curriculum about unconscious bias for grades K through 12. Teachers need to be invested and know how to teach the diversity material appropriately to their students' age level. This could look like a puppet show in kindergarten or a community project in high school. In my youth equity class, we are learning that, quote, if you are not fighting the system, you are complicit with its wrongs, end quote. The state government has the responsibility to make this curriculum. If you are not fighting to end discrimination, then you are for discrimination. Neutrality is not an option. A curriculum needs to be established to educate students about unconscious bias. The lack of education about this is hurting people in the community. The government has taken some action, but it is not enough.
The fruits of mercy. Iron bars barricade doors and windows. Barbed wire stands ready to diminish hope. It is January 1st, 1986, and the Marion Adjustment Center in St. Mary, Kentucky will soon fill with prisoners from other states. This early for-profit prison is the beginning of a growing trend that will impact thousands of lives, including those of Vermont prisons. One incarcerated man only saw his family twice in the nearly 2 years he was held in Kentucky. However, in Vermont, his family paid him weekly visits. This practice of transferring inmates out of state is horrendous, he said. You're taking people who, whatever support network they may have, is now gone. It is the state's duty to protect all citizens, but the state must also provide a humane, economically feasible chance for redemption. Today, Vermont reduces prison expenses and overcrowding by shipping incarcerated individuals across state lines. Officials overlook barbarous conditions in favor of cost cutting. Stacy Johnson, a Chittenden County public defender, informed me that Vermont pays a private firm in Mississippi approximately $25,000 per individual. This lowers incarceration costs by 40%. But the interstate transfer of inmates erodes connections with families. Financial burdens make it almost impossible for inmates to maintain ties with loved ones. A study in 2015 found that 34% of families fell into debt for paying for phone calls and visits. Before we bring our prisoners home, system reform must occur to open beds. Alarmingly, Vermont has a 52.5% recidivism rate in the first 3 years after inmates are released. Decreasing that number is crucial to welcoming inmates back in state, in part due to economic realities. We must help them build stability in their lives. Our Vermont community must plant a seed of restoration and help it grow. Currently, prisoners lack resources before and after they are released. Left to fend for themselves, relapse often occurs. I propose a pilot program with a clear goal: reduce recidivism. It will include vocational training, expand our current GED program, and help individuals build bridges to their communities. Inmates need to work outside of prison, as they do so successfully in Germany. They should get paid and have the opportunity to save that money to build financial stability and preparation for release. Today, the minimal jobs offered in Vermont prisons pay 54 cents an hour. Vermont should negotiate contracts with private enterprises, offering inmate employment for half minimum wage. This would provide businesses with an incentive to hire inmates. While working alongside community members, the process of reintegration would commence. People make mistakes and act based on their options, but people also change. The state government must provide a deterrent, but when a debt to society is paid, we must seek closure. Following the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln took a far-sighted approach to healing our wounded country. He forgave the South, believing that both sides had suffered enough. Vermont's prison system should follow Lincoln's example. As he once said, "I found that mercy bears richer fruits than strict justice."
What an inspiration to us all. The message is clear. Students are paying attention and they care about Vermont. To learn more about the Lincoln Essay Competition and Hildene, the Lincoln Family Home, please visit our website at www.hildene.org or our Facebook page, or come visit our magnificent 412-acre estate in person in beautiful Manchester, Vermont. Thank you.